Welcome, everyone. I will now call the January 13th, 2025 meeting to order at 6 p.m. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none, we will now turn to Councillor Use for the consent agenda, please.
Moved by myself, Councillor Use, seconded by Councillor Haliru, that the items contained in the January 13th, 2025 consent agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Haliru, please, the minutes of the December 9th meeting.
Thank you. Moved by myself, Councillor Haliru, seconded by Councillor Pecuniary, that the minutes of December 9th, 2024 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? None. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Councillor Van Kooten-Bossen's the December 16th special meeting minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hudson, that the minutes of the December 16th, 2024 special meeting of council be adopted as presented.
Thank you very much. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, and that will take us right into our special staff reports, and I will turn that over to Mr. Grave to start. Or would you like me to turn it over to the planner? We will go right to our first report. Welcome, Heather. If you want to present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. So the first application on tonight's agenda, Council may recall, is an application for zone change, which was presented in December to remove the parking setback provision of the general industrial zone as it applies to the portion of the subject lands that are currently zoned as Special General Industrial Zone MG-9. The intent of the application for zone change was to allow for parking within the front and exterior side yard of the subject lands. And the subject lands have been draft approved for the creation of 11 blocks for industrial development with frontages on Wallace Line and Robinson Road, as well as a proposed new interior cul-de-sac. So staff have reviewed the application and are satisfied that the request is consistent with policy direction from both the provincial planning statement as well as the county's official plan, as the request will facilitate industrial development on lands that are intended for industrial use. And based on the initial site plan applications submitted, staff are satisfied that the proposal will also comply with the policy direction of the official plan for industrial site design, which is to ensure that sufficient parking is provided and buildings are appropriately set back from the road allowance to ensure, thank you, that sufficient landscaped open space is provided on industrial parcels, and this has been appropriately addressed. The zoning bylaw amendment, however, is required to the general industrial development provisions of the MG table in the zoning bylaw, which states that no parking aside from visitor parking is permitted within the front and exterior side yard of industrial zone land. And it's the intent of this setback provision to ensure that sufficient buffering is provided between industrial development and the public right-of-way to improve sightlines along the public realm and provide areas on industrial lands for landscape open space as well as green space for aesthetic purposes and drainage. So in this instance, the subject lands are located within an area of town that's largely designated for industrial use. And as such, the impact that the proposed parking area may have on adjacent land uses for streetscape would be minimal. The applicants have submitted site plan applications for 4 of the proposed blocks in the draft plan of subdivision, which we've provided an example of one of them on the screen. And all of those show appropriate landscape buffering between the proposed parking area and the public right-of-way, with all site plans showing a minimum of 1 meter between the parking area and the property lines, which is in keeping with the setback provisions of Table 5.19.4 of the zoning bylaw for industrial development. Further, as part of the site plan review, detailed review will be had to ensure that proper drainage is provided, and town engineering staff have requested the review of a truck turning movements for each of the site plans to ensure that the proposed truck maneuvers can be made safely without impacting the overall vehicle and pedestrian movements on the site. Also, it is noted that the existing provision in the MG zone restricts parking in the front and exterior side yards for all vehicles with the exception of visitor parking spaces. However, it is noted that visitor parking is not expressly required in the MG zone, and therefore visitor parking would be at the discretion of the property owner to assign. So given that much of the proposed parking for the subdivision will be for employee parking, staff are recommending that the applicant's request be approved in order to reduce the parking setback to 1 meter or 3.3 feet to the property line, which is consistent with the provisions of Table 5.19.4. It is also noted that the lands to the immediate west of the subdivision do contain an existing single detached dwelling associated with a farm. And the owners spoke at the public meeting with concerns with respect to the proposed industrial development. This dwelling is considered to be a sensitive land use, and although from the street line does not have an immediate impact on this neighboring residence, council is advised that consideration is being had for this existing use through the site plan review process, specifically for Block 3, and a noise study is currently being undertaken to consider if there'll be any adverse impacts and how to mitigate those. So overall, staff are of the opinion that the requested amendment to the required parking setback of the MG zone can be approved to allow for parking of vehicles in the required front and exterior side yard with minimum setback of 1 meter or 3.3 feet to the street line, and a bylaw has been prepared for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the report? None. Are there any questions from online? Deputy Mayor, I just can't see you right now, so if you have any questions, please speak up.
No, I'm good, but I will say the cameras are off and I can't see the presentation slide deck.
Okay. We'll just see if we can't get that fixed for you. Thank you for notifying us of that. In the meantime, I didn't see any other further questions. So I will turn to Councillor Hudson, please, for a motion.
Thank you. Through you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hughes, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report CP 2025-12 as information, and that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll approve application submitted by 2862083 Ontario Inc., whereby the existing Special General Industrial Zone MG9 that applies to the lands described as Part Lot 25, Concession 1, West Oxford, Town of Ingersoll, municipality known as 274171 Wallace Line, is to be amended to permit parking within the required front and exterior side yard to a minimum of 1 meter from the property line.
Thank you very much. Discussion on that. Councillor Hughes, please.
I'm glad to see that we're all in agreement in letting or approving this type of changes. Makes it easier for our community to attract other industries and businesses that will definitely add to the overall success of our town.
Councillor Van Kouten-Bosens, please.
I also wanted to say thank you to the owners of the business that are taking into consideration the property beside them. I was listening to hear, and our planner brought that up, so I'm thankful for that, and I'm sure that they are as well. So thank you very much.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I'll turn it back over to you, Heather.
Thank you. So the next application for zone change has been received to permit the development of a detached residential accessory building, 178.8 square meters or 1,925 square feet in size, which exceeds the maximum permitted lot coverage for residential accessory buildings in the zoning bylaw, which is 100 square meters or 1,076 square feet, or 10% of lot coverage, whichever is lesser. The proposed zone change will also recognize the use of the land as residential, which has recently changed from agricultural as a result of being brought into the town's boundary as a part of the annexation agreement with the Township of Southwest Oxford and the adoption of the Southwest Ingersoll Secondary Plan, which has redesignated the subject lands from agricultural reserve to medium-density residential. Further, the lands themselves have been recently created as a residential parcel from a larger farm parcel by the town as part of a recent purchase and sale agreement. The subject lands are located on the south side of Clarke Road, east of Harris Street, and are approximately 1.8 acres in size and contain an existing single detached dwelling and are currently serviced by a private well and septic system. Staff have reviewed the proposal under the policy direction of the provincial planning statement and the official plan and are of the opinion that the rezoning to a residential zone is appropriate given the recent secondary planning and the new designation to medium-density residential, which is intended to facilitate a range of housing types that exceed the density targets for low-density residential and would include developments such as low-rise apartments and townhouses. However, based on this medium-density policy designation, planning staff are recommending that rather than rezoning the subject lands to a residential type 1 zone, as was requested, the subject lands be rezoned to a special residential type 3 zone that would allow for the full range of uses permitted in the R3 zone, but would also include a site-specific provision to recognize the existing single detached dwelling, as well as the proposed accessory building size. Staff note that approval of the R3 zone would recognize the existing single detached dwelling, which is permitted as part of the policy framework for lands designated medium density if it's existing. And approval of the rezoning is not anticipated to have an impact on the ability of the surrounding lands to develop for medium density residential purposes as part of future development initiatives, and would provide the owner with flexibility for future residential development on the subject land without having to make a subsequent planning application in the future. With respect to the request to the increase to the maximum lot coverage allowance for the detached residential accessory building, as mentioned, the subject lands are currently zoned as A2 general agricultural in the Township of Southwest Oxford zoning bylaw. This zoning was carried forward when the lands, from when the lands were previously located within Southwest Oxford, and it allows for a wide range of agricultural uses as well as the single detached dwelling if it's accessory to a farm. The A2 zone in the Township zoning bylaw permits detached residential accessory structures to a maximum lot coverage of 185 square meters or 2,000 square feet, whichever is lesser. However, given that the subject lands are now located within the town's settlement boundary, it's appropriate to review the proposal in light of the general provisions in the town's bylaw, which, as stated, limit accessory structures to a maximum of 100 square meters. It's the intent of the lot coverage provision to ensure that accessory buildings remain secondary and subordinate to the main use of the property for residential purposes and have minimal impact on surrounding land uses. It's also the intent of this provision to ensure that these structures continue to make sure that there's sufficient space for private off-street parking, private services, and amenity space. And while it is noted that the proposed structure size is larger than what would typically be supported by the planning department, we are of the opinion that given the size of the subject lands and their current zoning, which would have permitted the accessory structure size subject to meeting the minimum lot area requirements, the request can be supported from a planning perspective in this instance. Specifically, we're satisfied that the proposed structure, which would result in an overall lot coverage of only 2.4%, and we're satisfied that the subject lands are sufficiently large enough to continue to provide for private amenity space and off-street parking. And in this instance, it will replace an existing attached garage to be removed. Further, the proposed structure is not anticipated to have any adverse impact on the existing or planned residential development in the immediate area or detrimentally affect the ability of the land to be developed for future residential purposes at a higher density in the future. So overall, staff are of the opinion that it's appropriate to rezone the subject lands to a special R3 zone, to implement the new policy designation of the subject lands, inclusive of the site-specific provision to recognize the existing single detached dwelling, and to permit the residential accessory structure to a maximum size of 179 square meters or 1,925 square feet. And we have prepared a bylaw for council's consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of the report? Councillor Haliru, please.
Thank you, Heather. Through you, Mayor. I just want to confirm, when you say the accessory that is allowed on the slot, is it the same as having that secondary dwelling that we've already passed as a council?
Through your worship to Councillor Haliru. No, so there's a difference between a detached residential structure is essentially a detached garage versus an additional residential unit, but it is easy to confuse the two.
So would it be, follow-up, sorry, so would it be allowed if they wanted to do another dwelling? Or is that a different zoning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be subject to the existing zoning provisions for additional residential units, which do limit the size of those units. So it would not, based on the size that they're proposing for this detached garage, it would not be able to occupy the entirety of that structure, but it could potentially occupy a portion of it in the future, but that would be subject to future building permits as well.
Follow-up. All right, so now that we know that there's properties around this land, and we know that they had already, under a previous bylaw, adhere to that, is this something that we can encourage everyone to be aware of changes that they might be able to put through? Because I'm looking at a situation down the road where people last minute want to make this application, and I'm wondering, is there a way proactively, because of the nature of what's coming, that people can be prepared and plan way in advance for whatever structures or whatever you foresee might be a change that someone might want to make right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would recommend that if anybody has any questions about their future development goals, to come and speak with staff, and we can kind of advise them of what the plans are for the area, because for the majority of it, it has been redesignated to medium-density residential. So if they want to talk to us, we're always welcome. We always welcome people to come in, and we can discuss what their options are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, I will call on Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Moved by myself, Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Haliru, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report CP 2025-14 as information, and that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll approve the zone change application submitted by Nicholas and Courtney Groot for the lands described as Part Lot 18, Concession 2, West Oxford, being municipally known as 543936 Clarke Road East, to rezone the subject lands from General Agricultural Zone A2 to Special Residential Type 3 Zone R3SP, to recognize the existing single detached dwelling and to permit the detached accessory building 179 meters square or 1,925 feet square in size.
Thank you very much. Discussion. I'll just say that I certainly appreciate the planning staff working with the applicant and coming up with, I think, is a better solution than just the R1 designation. It certainly gives everybody an options to be able to do what they would like to today, but also many more options in the future if that's what's sought after without going through another process. So appreciate the expertise there, and I think it certainly can support this as it, as you said, it's maybe over the size of accessory building, but it's certainly on the grand scale of the lot. It's a small coverage, so yeah, happy to support that. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, we'll now go to item 3, which is the Town of Ingersoll 2025 to 2028 multi-year accessibility plan. Mr. Graves.
Thank you. The accessibility plan is a requirement of the province, and as such, the clerk's department has done a good job of making sure our plan is up to date. With that, I'll turn it over to them to advise on any details they want to make specific.
Thank you. So this report presents to Council the 2025 to 2028 Ingersoll multi-year accessibility plan for consideration. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, otherwise known as AODA, mandates the creation and enforcement of accessibility standards to ensure equitable access to goods, services, facilities, and employment for individuals with disabilities across Ontario. And so within that act is the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, also known as the IASR, and that requires municipalities to develop and maintain a multi-year accessibility plan that is intended to outline strategies to identify, remove, and prevent accessibility barriers that individuals may face when accessing goods, services, or employment. Or our facilities as well, sorry. The town of Ingersoll's multi-year plan reflects its commitment to an inclusive and accessible community and builds on past progress, details compliance measures for IASR requirements, and includes actionable steps to ensure accessibilities in areas such as information, communication, transportation, employment, and public spaces. So all of those are requirements under the IASR. Council will note this plan includes input from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that committee actually formally approved the plan at their most recent meeting on January 6th. The addition of a responsible department column, which was a recommendation of that committee to help ensure that some of these responsibilities are being assigned appropriately and for better tracking of compliance, and revise next steps to maintain and then further compliance as established in the plan. The plan is seen as a living document, so at a minimum will be reviewed every 5 years, but updated as necessary. And if approved, will be posted on the town's website with progress updates provided to council. It's a fairly lengthy document, but happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much. Questions of the report? Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So this was in conjunction with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Did they, sorry, I apologize, I cannot remember which member of council is on the, oh, you're on, okay. Was there any community involvement in regards to how this document was brought forward and if it was presented for input from the community?
To answer your question, Councillor Hughes, through the mayor, there wasn't community input. However, the Accessibility Advisory Committee is made up of individuals from the community, and as required by the Act, majority of those members are to have disabilities so that they can provide that insight and be able to review the plan through the lens of those individuals who may face barriers in the community. So we really relied on the input from that committee to help inform the plan and review it.
Councillor Haliru, please.
And if I may add, early on in the year when we started the review, we actually did go out to do the committee went out to do the audits, and we kind of brought that in as well to make sure that it was kind of in line with new policies or new parameters. So I think that was the extent to which we would say we did go in and ask questions of the community, but not necessarily an input.
Perfect. Any further questions? Seeing none, Councillor Haliru, please.
Thank you. Through you. Moved by myself, Councillor Haliru, seconded by Councillor Van Bosens, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report C-002-25 as information, and that Council approve Town of Ingersoll 2025 to 2028 multi-year plan.
Thank you very much. Discussion. I just want to thank the committee members for stepping up. Not all communities have a accessibility committee by mandate because of sizing. And so I do sit on the accessibility committee for the county, and so they do work for those smaller municipalities within the county that don't have their own committee. So we're very lucky to have people willing in the community to step forward and help us with this, to get something, and I think that's accessibility is one of those items that it needs to be talked about more, because it is one of those items that affects everybody at some point in their life. And that makes us, certainly with a public facility, we want everybody to be able to enjoy their community and make sure that they can access items. So having that expertise come forward and sit on the committee is very important. So I know it's a job, a large job to get this put together, so well done. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we'll now move on to item number 4, which is the 2025 to 2027 multi-year budget update. Mr. Graves, please.
Thank you. Staff are very proud of where we're at with the budget at this point, and we certainly appreciate council's direction that we've received to get us to this point. We think this budget accomplishes a lot of the goals that we wanted to accomplish. In fact, it accomplishes some of them much quicker than we had originally anticipated. We think this sets us up well to accomplish everything that we want to accomplish by the end of this term, and therefore we're bringing it forward for council's consideration. I'll turn it over to Irene if she has any specific things that she'd like to point out.
Yes, thank you, Michael. There's a couple items I would like to highlight. The changes made to the budget since the submission presented on December 16th. So the following adjustments have been made in accordance with council's direction provided at that meeting. So we moved the grants for volunteer organizations from Clarke's budget to council budget. Council meetings, conferences, and training budget was reduced by $8,000, and that reduction was reallocated to council marketing and promotion budget. We also reallocated allocated $10,000 from council marketing and promotion budget to sponsor the Ingersoll Kiwanis Club 2025 events on the diamond level, and also added to $10,000 transfer from reserve to fund the physician recruitment, to Alexander Hospital One Child Capital campaign. So all these changes did not impact the levy. And if we look at 2025, the total requirement from taxation in 2025 is $18,779,000 compared to $18,014,000 in 2024. This represents 4.24% levy increase, or $764,000. So this proposed levy increase amounts to about 2.3%, or $48 for the median single-family residential property assessed at $229,000. So that concludes my presentation. I didn't prepare the presentation because nothing was changed. And we are recommending council to approve the budget as outlined in the attached budget document. Council has any questions, I will be more than happy to address them.
Thank you very much. Questions of the report? Councillor Hughes, please.
I just have a couple, actually, one question. I know this is a multi-year budget, and we started it in 2024 to flow through to 2027. Seeing as we're carrying on with a multi-year budget, and it's not a requirement for this year, but should we not be also now moving a year ahead, so going to 2028, next year go to 2029, so we continue that multi-year budget scheduling, throughout this whole process?
So it's the requirement of the Municipal Act that current council approved 4-year budget, it's up to 4 years, and then reconfirms it every year, and then the new term of council will adopt the next 4-year budget.
Further questions? Seeing none, I will call on Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and then seconded by Councillor Hudson, that the 2025 to 2027 multi-year budget update be received, and that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll approves the 2025 to 2027 multi-year operating budget subject to any amendments in budget confirmation years as follows. A 2025 operating budget with a gross expenditure budget of $23,554,916 and a 2025 property tax levy of $18,779,122. B, a 2026 operating budget with a gross expenditure budget of $24,646,778 and a 2026 property tax levy of $19,971,255. C, a 2027 operating budget with a gross expenditure budget of $25,564,387 and a 2027 property tax levy of $21,105,168, and that Council approves the required transfers to and from reserves and reserve funds as outlined in the Town of Ingersoll 2025-2027 multi-year operating budget update, subject to amendments during the confirmation budget years. And that Council approves a cost of living adjustment of 3% for all part-time and full-time non-union staff as well as elected officials for the year 2025. And that a bylaw to establish the appropriate tax rates to affect the 2025 budget approval will be brought forward for Council consideration in April 2025.
Thank you very much. Discussion. Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens is the mover, please.
Thank you. I would like to thank Irina and all of our council, or all of our staff, for their continued commitment in keeping our budget where it needs to be, and that's moving the business of this town forward. Once again, you bring forward a budget that, a few questions, but really, you've done the homework. You've made sure that the numbers are where they need to be. There's not a whole lot of fat that needs to be trimmed there. It's good budget, and I'm proud to stand behind that. Thank you.
Further discussion? I'm going to second those comments. Ingersoll is going to be in a very enviable place across the county, certainly not without its peers when it comes to the rates that we're seeing, but it's a challenging time. But what consistency and hard work has done has been able to allow us to give the resources to staff that they've asked for without putting a burden on the community, and that's not by accident, that's by a lot of hard work. And so again, I also want to thank all those responsible, and certainly those that are sitting in front of us and beside us here today that have done that, because you don't have to look very far, near and far, to see that other communities are in not the same position, and they're not going to be able to meet the same goals that we are in the near future without the financial pressures being placed on it. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be financial pressure. We're starting on a probably the biggest infrastructure project that the town has ever seen with the servicing this year, and we can now say that next year we will start to build the MERC. So there are some challenges ahead, but we are certainly within a much better position, and to see that only an effective rate of 2.23% is fantastic. Again, but that comes with a lot of planning and a lot of thanks to previous councils and staff for the work that they put in to get us here in a position where we can make this move forward. So I absolutely have no problem supporting this budget. Again, it provides our staff with the resources to be able to do the jobs we ask them to do, which is something that we should provide, and be able to move the goals, not on a strategic plan, but all those other important documents that we look at from time to time to move those goals forward. So it's a good day. Councillor Haliru, please.
Well, I might add, when you think about this, you have to commend every department head for being on time, proactively seeing what we need, because I know Irina's job would not be this easy if she didn't have this corporation. And I think as a team, you guys looked really good putting this together. And I think it just, as you guys kept talking, I just felt, feeling the work that goes behind something like this. And I want to commend you guys.
Your comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Excellent. There are no delegations and presentations, so we will now move on to correspondence, which is from the Township of Southwest Oxford, request for broadband servicing support. Mr. Graves, would you like to comment on that, please?
Sure. We received this request from Southwest Oxford, as council is aware, with the boundary adjustment that occurred a few years ago. We brought in lands into our boundary. These lands are now in our boundary. Southwest Oxford is working for quite some time on ensuring that they get increased internet service provisions to their municipalities. As we tend to forget sometimes in the urban centers that a lot of the rurals are still suffering with very limited internet access. And there is a group based out of sort of northwestern Ontario that's trying to, the SWIFT group that's trying to get internet to a broadband to all a number of rural communities. And Southwest Oxford is a partner in that, bringing forward those services. They were intending on putting them in, or did put them in, on the Curry Road, and it would have been something that likely was considered through the boundary adjustment process, but it was not considered. So the township has asked for this to come forward for council consideration as an item that council would consider paying for those residents.
Thank you very much. Questions of the report, of the request? Seeing none, Councillor Hudson, are you prepared to move a motion?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hughes, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive the correspondence from the Township of Southwest Oxford as information, and that Council direct staff to invite a Township of Southwest Oxford representative to appear before Council to provide additional information on the request for broadband servicing support.
The seconder, you're good with that? Okay. Discussion. As the mover, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure. We also do have the option of just allocating those funds, which are $15,969.57 for servicing the 50% of the one side of the roadway from the finance reserve. So that is also another option if we want to go that route.
Let's have some discussion on the motion on the floor, and if need be, we can procedurally change our direction if that's the way council wants to go, or we can proceed, certainly. Discussion. Councillor Hughes, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is something that we should look at, and I think option B, I think, would have been a better option to move on the motion, but that's fine. I'll support that. At the same time, it is a responsibility that we should also be bringing in internet so that all the residents, not just Ingersoll, because I know ExecuLink has done a lot in Ingersoll with their fiber and everything, installing lines and doing all of that work there, and it's only fair that it makes sense to have all of Ingersoll covered as opposed to just a section. So whichever direction council chooses to go in, I will definitely continue to second that motion.
Councillor Van Kootenbos, then Councillor Haliru, please.
Thank you. I personally don't have any other questions that I would need to ask of Southwest Oxford in that respect. And I'd have no problem in supporting the $15,000, almost $16,000 to support them. It's a small portion, and I know people are going to say, what do you mean it's a small portion? It's a small portion for us in our budget in that respect, and they are a part of our town at this point. So I don't have a problem in supporting going ahead with the optional. And I'm happy to move that or say go for it in putting it as a part of the motion in that respect. So, but Councillor Haliru wants to also speak, so I will hold back on putting forth anything. So, thanks.
Councillor Haliru, please.
Thank you. Definitely think that this is something that we ought to take responsibility for. They've said it's 50% for our side. I think we should honor that. I've worked in telecom for 10 years, and I will tell you, it's not sometimes the main put out that you do at once. It's the small incremental expanding that happens. And with us actually having a section of our community also expand in that area, I guess rurally, there might be a need to accommodate that again. So I think every time we get this, just doing our part will mean a huge deal to them. So I support that we give them the 15,000.
Okay. Further discussion? Councillor Hudson, please.
How about I reread a new motion?
Just for clarity, to the clerk, would you like to have I believe the procedure is that if the councils agree upon, the mover and the seconder can rescind the current resolution.
Technically, because it was moved and seconded, it now belongs to the assembly, so it has to be of the assembly. I mean, informally, you could do that.
Yeah, so yeah, if the assembly is in agreement, and we can have a vote on that, or we can just, we ran into this at county council just this week, so I had a little practice on this one. And I'll defer to the warden's wisdom on this one, so I will put it out there that I'm assuming you would like to rescind your motion and go with the other option. So if I don't see any objection from council, I'll take that as a positive that council's in agreement with that. With allowing the mover and the seconder to remove their current resolution. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. So we'll consider that one removed, and I will call upon Councillor Hudson again, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hughes, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive the correspondence from the Township of Southwest Oxford as information, that Council directs staff to allocate $15,969.57 to the Township of Southwest Oxford for the servicing of 50%, one side of 3.86 kilometers of roadway from the Finance Reserve.
Thank you very much. Discussion. Councillor Hughes, please.
Just a information question. Where will that money be brought out of? What reserve?
Finance reserve?
Further discussion? I'll just say I think this is the right thing to do. Sometimes, as Councillor Van Kooten-Boston says, our budget's much larger than Southwest Oxford, and so when you look at that amount of money, that's a 0.25% of an increase to them, a 0.25 percentage point on their budget. And certainly I know that Southwest Oxford has more goals to be able to provide more broadband for them, so I'm sure that's where this is going to go, and allows that to happen. And certainly they provide their math there, and it certainly seems to make sense. These are our residents now, and I assure you that it was, and talking to Mayor Mayberry at the time, it was just something that was missed. They didn't get the bills in time, so it's something that they would have included. So in the future, that's going to be industrial land as well, so they'll be able to service that, and that's a plus. So yeah, I 100% agree with the motion, and I think that'll go a long way, again, with continuing our great relationship that we have with Southwest Oxford. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Excellent. Okay, we'll now move on to notices of motions. Councillor Haliru, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So moved by myself. Whereas the town of Ingersoll celebrates diversity and aims to create an inclusive environment for all residents, and whereas recognition of holidays and observances across different cultures and religions foster a sense of belonging and mutual respect, and whereas the active engagement by council with diverse communities enhances relationships and demonstrates the town's commitment to inclusivity, therefore, Be it resolved that staff be directed to compile a comprehensive short list of major Canadian holidays and religious observances representing the diversity of the community, and that the list be incorporated into the town's annual planning to ensure inclusive acknowledgement and celebration of social media mentions, and that the town invite local cultural, religious groups to share their celebrations with council and the broader community, engage in active participation and support. And then a report outlining the finalized list and proposed actions to integrate these celebrations into the town's calendar be presented to council for approval by February meeting. Can I speak to that?
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Hughes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Haliru, as the mover, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, so I just want to highlight that there's so many diverse groups in the community that have actually reached out. And when I sit here, I do not sit here lightly, just pushing an ideology or an idea that has not been heard before. We have the Indian community, we have the Diwali celebrations. I got a lot of requests that they needed to do something. They would like to have us participate. Again, a year has started. There was the Kwanzaa celebrations across the country. Black History Month is coming. The diversity committee tried to put these calendars together. It was a bit challenging having quorum towards the end of the year. And I've made it a case to them that if we're not able to come together, that I would make a motion so that council considers it early enough. I just recently was part of a meeting, and I was in the room, of a Zoom room with Rosemary Sadler, who in fact is the one who put the motion for Jean Augustine in 1985 to propose February as Black History Month. I was surprised. She called me out in a meeting of 60 Black officials and said, my mother's family is from Ingersoll. And I was taken aback. She says, yes, I'm very glad to see representation because my mother's family came from here. There's a deep history, a deep Black history here. And unfortunately, for 2 years on council, we haven't really had a formal acknowledgement of it as a committee because we've been planning future-wise. I just saw a real need for us to actually have something concrete and to really listen to the voices that have been calling out. And I saw an opportunity. For example, when I did the diversity fair in 2022, I called out for council to come, and Christy was gracious enough to come, and she felt like I should be approaching council next time, so we shouldn't be doing this alone. And that was just a little effort for so many diverse people to come together to have a sense of belonging. And I think that just like many people go in and celebrate Christmas, we miss the fact that it's a mental health case now for so many families that have to retreat. They don't come out to celebrate because most Christian homes celebrate alone with their families. There's really not an interaction aside from the volunteer work that we do when we come out in the community. But there's other celebrations that actually want to share, that actually want to come out. And even if it means council designating that we should have maybe a public appearance for them to showcase, I see economic development, I see a sense of belonging, I see economic thriving in this community if only we acknowledge some certain groups. And these groups are acknowledged across the country in different communities. So I truly feel, not for anything other than a social media mention, hey, happy Diwali to those celebrating, happy Eid to those celebrating, happy, Hanukkah to those celebrating, just a simple list that can make us feel like we're really welcoming and creating a sense of belonging to our residents. And that's why I brought this motion forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughes is the second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Reading through this, totally agree with this. This is amazing. This is good. This is what we need. It's what all communities should have. I didn't speak with Councillor Haliru earlier before this. However, should this be directed more towards back to the DEI committee? They know better what these holidays are, where they are, what they encompass, and they can supply the list as opposed to staff supplying the list.
Do you want me to add? Yeah, so we did definitely try to start the process, and we actually were looking to get staff support for it in the same way that we were becoming overwhelmed with, the structure of holidays. There's so many, but when it comes to our staff, they can maybe help us narrow it down to what aligns maybe with provincial or something. So we were just looking at a situation where staff could help us out anyways. And because of quorum issues towards the end of the year, we didn't really get down to it. And I had made a case to our chair that I would put a motion forward if we're not able to get quorum to decide. Because again, January, February, March is already happening, and we're missing out again on the third year of not able to do that. And since we already wanted staff input anyways, I thought we'd just have staff give us a short list and then hopefully bring it back to council. That way we're moving the needle forward.
Mr. Graves.
Yeah, I'd just like to say it would be staff's preference that we do have the DEI committee look at it, just like accessibility that we just dealt with. We often want those groups to take a look at these items and make sure that they're covering off what they need to cover off. That's why we have them. We'd sure appreciate that input from them fully to bring forward a list. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, and that's my input to this as well. Again, certainly supportive of the direction. I think that that's not a problem. I am concerned on the time, even if it was approved for staff, that the timing is tight because there's a lot of. So I do know that the committee was working on this, and that was one of the things when we formed the committee was that we wanted that input on how do we celebrate the different cultural backgrounds and diversity within our community, and that certainly talks to that. So I know it's difficult work to try to come up with that list, but I certainly would like to. Do we know when's the next DI meeting? On Wednesday. So is it perhaps something that the committee can make a priority to discuss and try to get something, that input session in, to try to make sure that that's something that is a priority and have that input come through that group. I think that's, I just don't want to see anybody left out. And the thing is, I think that what's going to happen is even if staff brings something come forward, I'm going to personally want the DI committee to review it anyway, because they're going to want, you want that input. Just like Mr. Graves said, like the accountability committee, the accessibility committee, we want the people who are experts in that field or in lived experience to be able to have their input on it. So.
I agree, and this is why we wanted to get the needle forward. So if staff came up with something, we would actually take it back to the diversity committee and maybe look at it. I feel like we're not having another meeting till February. It's already Black History Month. It's the third year that we've got into Black History Month without a plan because we've been saying the same thing that we're saying again. So I feel like, just in fairness to the overwhelming nature of the work that we're doing at the DEI, if we had that, because we were promised maybe a staff support since, and Danielle had promised that we would definitely have that considered as she would put that forward. And I'm just thinking, because of time, this was something I wanted council to be aware of. And if you gave go ahead for staff to assist, then maybe we could make something move faster.
Further discussion? I thought Councillor Haliru, Councillor Van Coutten-Boston.
I'm hearing you, but at the same time, I'm agreeing with the rest of council that if your meeting is on Wednesday night, can you not pull together that list together as a DEI committee? I really don't want to sidestep the DEI committee. I think that if you weren't bringing this forward and one of us brought something like this forward, you would be saying to us, well, why isn't the DEI committee being involved? And so I don't want to sidestep the rest of the DEI committee. I don't think that that's fair as council for us to do. And then you could be bringing back a report from the DEI committee to the February meeting, which is not losing any time in that respect. And it's coming from the DEI committee. So I would like to defer your notice of motion in that respect until February, and we see what the DEI committee brings forward to us at council in that respect. I was under the impression that there had been some information that had been given to the DEI committee, because when I'd read your motion, I was like, okay, why are we sidestepping? So I did some asking around, and There was something that was given, from my understanding, from staff to the DEI committee. So I think it's a matter of, we're in January, so, or, you know, and you're about to meet for January. So meet as January committee and talk about it and really set down what it is that you think, even for the next 6 months, as a committee, of what we should be looking at as a council. But I strongly feel that it needs to come from the committee and not just council. It shouldn't be moved by us in that respect. So
I agree.
that's my own opinion, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
Clerk, please, Danielle.
So only speaking to Black History Month, I know that our social media officer, Siobhan, has a plan to run a campaign similar to what they did last year with input from the community. She will be attending Wednesday's meeting to go over that plan with the committee. So it doesn't speak to the wider scope of your motion, but it does capture that one piece in there.
Totally agree with all of you. Nobody should think that this is sidestepping the diversity. We just wanted to get a head start on this because, again, we were trying to work with staff. And I just wanted to make sure that we are aware that this is an important thing in the whole grand scheme of things, and that we are working on it, but we needed staff to be a part of it this time so that we can actually move the needle forward and then decide on those dates. So I agree, we'll have the meeting on Wednesday, and then we'll come back and I'll defer this motion to that, but I just really wanted to make sure that this year we actually did something seriously and we made that clear that there are members of this community. It's become a mental health issue. People just need something to do, somewhere to go, and we are focusing too much on what we should or shouldn't do. And I think at this point, as long as we all agree now, I feel very comfortable that I think you all see the value in this. And that's kind of why when we missed the meeting, I had told Patricia, okay, I'll just make it a motion so we can move it ahead faster. So it wasn't about sidestepping, it was about trying to get it ahead quicker. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, so I think that is something a tool that can be used and taken back to the committee now, and saying that council does want this to move forward. Certainly, we want the right people to do it, and we want it to have it done. I'm certainly feel confident that can happen, especially now that we have heard that there is plans for Black History Month in the works, so that can be addressed, and that the committee can get that portion of the work completed, and then that can be a broader policy that can be brought forward. I did hear you offer to move a deferral. Would you like to move that? Yeah. Okay. Seconder for that. Councillor Hughes, we'll keep it consistent. Discussion on the deferral. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, that takes us down to bylaws. Councillor Hughes, please.
We're moving right along here. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of the night. Moved by myself, Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Haliru, that the mover have leave to introduce and go into the committee of the whole on the following bylaws. A, bylaw number 25-5365 to amend bylaw number 23-5264 to add or remove individuals from council committees. B, bylaw 25-5366 to appoint integrity commissioner and closed meeting investigator. C, bylaw 25-5367 to amend zoning bylaw number 04-4160 as amended. D, bylaw 25-5368 to amend zoning bylaw number 04-4160 as amended. E, bylaw number 25-5369 to amend zoning bylaw number 04-4160 as amended. And F, bylaw number 25-5370, January 13th, 2025, confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you very much. Discussion. One thing I'll say is that you have extra time. It's snowing like crazy out there. I'm sure you can get to good use, sir. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We are now in committee of the whole. Would anybody discuss any of the bylaws? Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens.
I would just like to say thank you to longtime member of the Ingersoll Cheese and Agricultural Museum Advisory Committee, Gord Lesser. He served on that committee for many, many years, and I've always been of the opinion that you only get off of that when you die. There's a lot of people that have served very, very long times, and I know that Gord getting off of the committee is more so that he just doesn't have the time with his business and his wife's new business. So I just wanted to put out a thank you to him for his time well served on there.
Very well said and well deserved. Gord Lesser's just dedicated a lot of his years to the communities. Any other discussion on the bylaws? Seeing none, Councillor Haliru to rise, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, Councillor Haliru, seconded by Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens, that the committee do now rise out of committee of the whole.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens, third reading, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hudson, that the bylaws 25-5365 to 25-5370 be now read a third time, signed and sealed, and that it constitutes the third reading of the bylaws.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Councillor Hudson to adjourn, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hughes, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll adjourn the January 13th, 2025 regular meeting of Council at 7:01 p.m.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Everybody drive safe. Deputy Mayor Wilson, feel better.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.